I will try to answer and help you understand the questions. Uh, just mention the main concepts without going into the details of the construction. So I think it will be more helpful in this. Thank you so much. Collected from your apps by various social media and all these are being then. There was also a report about these actually trigger a lot of questions regarding utility or how data is being stored, what are the rules and regulations around privacy and so on. So when you talk of data sharing, a couple of things are very important. The signal server, so sharing data with so many people, you are taking the help of storage service provider. Are you sure that this data is being held properly? Becoming very important nowadays. How do we comply with data sharing? Whom do we share data with? Are we sharing the data with the right people for the right purpose, the right environment, for the right for the sense of before we share the data, with whom we share the data, data sharing, and these are all important to make to make informed decisions when it comes to data, when it comes to private. One in the EU, data protection team. There is the personal data protection bill. I'm sorry, my data on the Amazon server. Amazon might say yes, it was encrypted, but who gives the guarantee that it's encrypted? Do I know proper? Is there a nice way that we could actually try to prove that yes, I have protection against my data valid without downloading the whole data? If that, then that fulfills my responsibility of protecting your data. Data owner who submits a task to the service provider, and the task is that it returns the results, but it might take some statistics, or it does some prediction that like which route to take in a crowded city or something of that sort, and it returns the results. Now, it's good to be that the computation is correct. The computation might not. It would still pass the check. So there are issues with this. Trying to do this is that these are. Is this relevant? Is this really blockchain, which is Filecoin? It is an open source cloud storage marketplace protocol and cryptocurrency. So this is a very nice peer-to-peer storage system, or I would not say this, and it works on a over a blockchain. So this is something that you will see that where a blockchain has an application design. So storage, the GR network is a blockchain, so that's a blockchain, and the storage is also built on blockchain. It's also a decentralized storage system. So let me talk about the first problem, because actually one way of doing this is to actually generate a block and the signature on the block and send it to the server, and later query random index I and return the block and the signature or an authenticator. So here the signature could be a signature, it could be a message authentication code, and something that I talked about, the digital signature, this is an example where it can also be used. Now, as I mentioned, that no one can force the signature, so no one apart from the block, from the data owner can actually verify this part. So verification, private verification, message authentication code, yes. Similarly, you could also use a digital signature. Also, this can be verified by a third party because it is a public verification scheme. Signatures can be publicly verified, as we mentioned before. So it's all good. Now, the question comes like before that can we, we are doing multiple, we are actually sending multiple block and signature schemes to verify. Can we have a compact message signature that is good to one? So where you could have one again and again, where you could actually choose more random indices and try to verify that you have done it correctly. And forget about all the notations that you see in the whole thing. Let's not get into it, but this is how a verification would typically look like. So what I'm going to do is that since I'm talking about this, why does the blockchain come into picture, and how do we use it? I talk about one more challenge, which is that of encryption, or what I've been looking at on this. So the blockchain comes where I'm actually over here every time. It might actually tamper my data, it might actually delete my data, it might lose my data. So many things can happen at the server side. So I'm assuming that the server is dishonest. Now, it could happen that it knows that if I could actually frame the server, then I could actually get some monetary reward. I could actually sue Amazon and say that, look, Amazon did not actually store my data correctly, and now I need a compensation. How to solve it? So typically, in the normal scenario, what would happen is that the data owner and the Amazon would both go to the court, and both would submit some evidence. Like, the owner might say, look, I uploaded this data at this time, and Amazon might say, no, this is not the data you are uploaded, or something of the sort. And both have to give some evidence, and finally, it will be the judge's decision, looking at the evidence, to decide like who is right, who is wrong, how much compensation to give each, and so on. Right? So we are taking the help of a trusted entity or the trusted party to figure out or to come to a decision as to who is right and who is wrong. Now, that is where the blockchain comes in. Instead of setting a dispute in the court of law, with the trusted arbitrator. So we trust the judge, we trust the court. That is why we are going to the court to come to a settlement, right? Now, here, the whole thing can be taken care of by a blockchain. So that is one thing that you need to remember. If you forget my entire, talk, you should actually try to understand why I needed the blockchain in the first place. It is an entity who is a trusted arbitrator. You trust the blockchain. You take because it is, you cannot tamper records on the blockchain. It is maintained by various parties, or a large number of nodes. You cannot tamper information. You cannot tamper your evidences. So why don't I, instead of going and submitting my evidences to the court, I go to the blockchain and try to, have a automated mechanism to settle everything, right? So this is an automated mechanism that you would like to do, and why this automation comes in is because you are able to use the smart contracts on the blockchain to do this. So the point over here is that you could write smart contracts to just validate just check that the proof is correct or wrong. The proof of correctness of computation is right or wrong. The proof of integrity is right or wrong. You just need to write a smart contract. And I believe that the smart contracts, how to write smart contracts, have already been built in the last couple of days. So I'm not going to say exactly how I'm going to write a smart contract for this, but the main idea is that it's not going to be as easy as the examples that you were shown, but it would need some thought as to what sort of a smart contract it is going to be. But the underlying thing that you need to understand is that there is an automated process of collection of evidences and verifying the evidences that is done by the blockchain, and that is the strength that we need from the blockchain. So blockchain is a trusted arbitrator. It is actually keeping all the step by step or the time to the server, and this is what is happening. Now, note things is that because the blockchain is able to keep a record of all the things that are happening in this system, it makes things much more easier and systematic. And yourself that it's going to be inefficient. So what am I going to do? So that is a challenge. That's why I said that the smart contracts is not going to be as simple as the examples that you saw. So the data owner typically submits an evidence of the task. It will not submit the task itself. So if it would have submitted the task itself, then the blockchain peers would have actually had to do the computation. We don't want that. The server is doing the computation. So note the difference, that the blockchain peers are not doing any computation. The server is doing the computation. It is sending a proof that it has done the computation properly. And this proof is publicly verifiable. So, everyone can verify the whole thing. So the question comes like, what is it that I'm going to submit as a evidence? And it will depend upon what data or what is the computation that I'm going to do and what is it that I'm going to verify. But note that the underlying smart contracts can handle this information. So they can validate, just like verification of the proof that was done by the data owner earlier. Now the verification of the proof can be done by anyone, including the peer nodes in the blockchain, by just running the smart contract. The smart contract is a set of rules that will help you to verify the underlying proofs. That is why these proofs, verifiability is such a very important concept in the case of blockchain. So the whole thing, it's not that here I'm not talking anything about zero. Simple verification of or the integrity check of the data. Can add a twist to it, like how do I, the peer nodes will validate the transactions are correct, but for that I need the data. So can I do without knowing the data? Can I verify the transactions without knowing the exact values that I'm going to, exact values of the transaction? Or can I verify the computation without knowing the data that is underlying the data? So can I average? And I compute can I verify the average without knowing the values average? Oh, sorry, values of a salary. Average salary without knowing the salary. So that is where, or anything about the salary. So that is where the zero knowledge proofs come in, and you don't want to give any information whatsoever to the peer nodes. And that is where what I was talking earlier, zero knowledge proofs are so important in the case of these verifiability. That I don't want to leak any information about the data, but still verify the evidence that I have at hand. The peer nodes, all the peer nodes have to done it, and I don't trust the peer nodes. The peer nodes might mess up with my data. They might steal the data themselves. So, I have to be really careful. So the natural, this is not a very simple task. It's actually a very, very difficult problem to do because, as I mentioned, there are a couple of things. You have to verify very quickly. You have to give short proofs. So there is always a big question, how do I do this efficiently with very little overheads? And this is a big challenge. So what I'm going to do is just, wrap up a bit, some of the, not wrap up, there are two things I will mention. One is, data marketplace, and I will talk about the Filecoin system. So let me just skip over this because I'm not going to talk, but what I'm going to talk about is a data marketplace, which is a very interesting application that could use blockchain. As I mentioned earlier, I feel it is a very, so you think of your normal Amazon marketplace where you have buyers and sellers. The buyers will typically, the sellers will typically use Amazon platform to sell their products. Buyers will pick up the products that try to buy, and then Amazon will handle the payments, pay the proper price to the sellers, give the proper product to the buyers, and then everyone should be happy. If anything goes wrong, then they could go to the court and settle. First, Amazon will try to settle. Then it's very simple. You return. A few days, and there's no dispute to that. Should be much dispute. But there could be. Because the sellers might say that, no, look, I mean, this was a perfectly nice product. I mean, why will I, it's not my fault. It was possibly the essentially higher product, and then just return it, which might not be. We don't know who is right, who is wrong. But you think of it that in a different context. So you think of it as a data market. Data markets essentially would have a lot of data being sold by the sellers, and because there is a big market for data. Everyone, whenever you are booking an Uber, or you are, going for dinner, and trying to go through do something on, try to see the information and book over Zomato, you're giving a lot of information about yourself, about your preferences, and so on. So, and people like the data that they are collecting. The telecom companies collect data, the transport companies collect data, and so on. So there's a lot of data being generated and being used. So there is a need for data all the time. So can users monetize on their data? Monetize when they sell their data. So typically, the corporates will tell you, look, I mean, we are collecting data to give you good services, but that's not all. They are using data to have to, their big business about data and how to properly use the data and glean information from the data. So owners want to monetize on the data, then they could actually do that, and that is where the data market comes from. So the data market is a platform where buyers actually buy data. Sellers actually sell data, buy data. It could be raw data, it could be some statistics about the data. So now we want to ensure that everyone, it's a fair market, meaning that the buyers receive whatever they were supposed to, the sellers receive whatever they were supposed to get, and the data market does not steal anything, like it pays proper amount to everyone, or gives the right thing to the buyer and the proper price to the seller. Now, with this question comes how do I ensure this a fair trade between the buyer and seller, and because this is a very difficult problem to solve, because in a very simple two-party scenario, you give the data or give something to the buyer runs away without paying. It could be a seller gets the thing, seller gets the payment but runs away without giving the product. So it's always, never fair. You have to have a third party to actually ensure fairness. And here you have three parties. You have to ensure fairness. You need a trusted arbitrator. Fair exchange possible without a trusted setup. That is why we rely on blockchain and the blockchain contracts for the payment mechanism and records setup. That is why we rely on blockchain and the blockchain contracts for the payment mechanism and records transfers undeniably. So that is why, for all these reasons, example of this is also fair content distribution, where you can think of a facilitator. So you think of your YouTube service. So there are many people who actually receive a royalty for the content that they put up on the YouTube by the viewership. So YouTube pays them depending upon the viewership. So we just assume typically that the YouTube is stealing or the royalty and or the content, and owner is not seeing anything on the royalty, and the buyer is going to pay. The buyer will pay for will get the right content and pay the right price. So now again,